July 20th, 1944. A German officer walks into Adolf Hitler's most secure military headquarters, the Wolf's Lair, deep in the forests of East Prussia. In his briefcase, a bomb. This officer was not a resistance fighter, not a spy, not an outsider. He was one of Hitler's own generals, a decorated war hero, a man who had fought for Germany on 3 continents. His name was Klaus von Stauffenberg, and on this day, he had come to kill Adolf Hitler. What happened next, in the next 12 hours, would be the most dramatic assassination attempt of the 20th century, a conspiracy involving hundreds of Germany's most senior military officers, a plan that came within inches of succeeding, and a failure that cost over 7,000 people their lives. This is the full, untold story of Operation Valkyrie. To understand why some of Hitler's own generals tried to kill him, you need to understand Germany in 1944. By the summer of 1944, the war was lost. Every senior German military officer knew it, even if they could not say it openly. On the Eastern Front, the Soviet Union had launched Operation Bagration, the largest military offensive in history. In just 8 weeks, the Soviets had destroyed an entire German army group. Over 400,000 German soldiers killed, captured, or missing. On the Western Front, the Americans and British had landed in Normandy on June 6th, D-Day. Within weeks, Allied forces were breaking out across France. Paris would fall within months. In the south, Italy had already been lost. Allied forces were pushing northward through the Italian peninsula. Germany was being crushed from every direction. And yet, Adolf Hitler refused to accept reality. Hitler had long since stopped listening to his generals. Officers who gave him bad news were fired, sometimes arrested, sometimes executed. The German military had been gutted of its best strategic minds, replaced by yes men who told Hitler what he wanted to hear. Germany was heading toward total destruction, and the man responsible, the man who had started it all, was sitting in his bunker, moving imaginary armies around on maps, and refusing to consider surrender. Some German officers had seen enough. They had watched Hitler lead Germany into catastrophe. They had watched hundreds of thousands of their soldiers die for a cause that was already lost. They had begun to learn the truth about what was happening in the camps, the industrialized murder of millions of Jews, Poles, and others that Hitler had ordered. They made a decision. Hitler had to die. The conspiracy against Hitler had been building for years. As early as 1938, before the war had even begun, a small group of German military officers and civilians had begun discussing the possibility of removing Hitler from power. They had watched him push Germany toward war, violate international agreements, and ignore the advice of every experienced military and diplomatic voice in the country. But Hitler's early successes had made action impossible. When Germany conquered Poland in 1939, when France fell in 1940, when victories seemed to come one after another, the German public adored Hitler. Any attempt to remove him would have been crushed immediately. By 1943, everything had changed. The catastrophic German defeat at Stalingrad, where an entire German army of 300,000 men had been destroyed, had shattered the myth of Hitler's military genius. The tide of the war had turned definitively against Germany. The conspiracy grew. At its center was a network of German military officers, government officials, and civilians who shared one conviction. Germany could only be saved if Hitler was removed. They called themselves the German Resistance. Their plan had 2 parts. Part 1, assassinate Adolf Hitler. Part 2, immediately after Hitler's death, use the German Reserve Army to seize control of Berlin and the major German cities. Arrest the SS leadership. Negotiate a peace with the Western Allies before the Soviet Union could advance further into Germany. The plan used an existing German military contingency, a plan called Operation Valkyrie, designed to mobilize the reserve army in case of internal unrest or a breakdown of order. The conspirators planned to use this plan, originally designed to protect Hitler, as the mechanism to overthrow him. It was brilliant, and it almost worked. But they needed someone who could get close enough to Hitler to kill him. In 1943, a new figure joined the conspiracy and immediately became its driving force. Colonel Klaus Philipp Maria Schenk, Graf von Stauffenberg. Stauffenberg was everything that Hitler's Germany claimed to admire. Aristocratic, brilliant. A decorated combat officer, deeply patriotic. He had served in Poland, France, and the Soviet Union. In April 1943, fighting in Tunisia and North Africa, his vehicle had been strafed by Allied aircraft. He lost his right hand, 2 fingers of his left hand, and his left